Welcome to the panel presented by Sport Chek. We are at Sport Chek's flagship location, located at West Edmonton Mall. And guys, Oil Country must be feeling pretty good right now. The team is coming off 4 wins in a row, and those wins were earned. They weren't by fluke.
The news in town is all good right now. I mean, Edmonton's doing a lot of things right. They're getting secondary offense from guys like Sam Gagner. Now Alex Chason's contributing. Zach Kassian has scored a goal in 4 straight games. Colby Cave and Josh Curry are giving them something a little bit in their top 9. So all of a sudden, Edmonton's got these secondary offensive options, and they're getting saves from Mikko Koskinen, who's played to a 93 save percentage really ever since the Cam Talbot trade. I mean, he's been fantastic. So when you get saves and you get a little more offense, well, chances are it lines up in the win column. But Bob will tell you, unfortunately, the news out of town, not so good, is the chief contenders for that wild card spot, Minnesota, Dallas, and Arizona, are all on the same heater the Oilers are.
Yeah, well, you mentioned it, and I mean, I just look at it from an Oilers perspective. They can only control what they can do, and for me, it starts with Mikko Koskinen. When the Oilers signed Mikko initially to the 1-year deal at $2.5 million, there was criticism on that deal. Then the 3-year extension at a time when Cam Talbot was still here obviously raised a lot of eyebrows in hockey circles. And since the Cam Talbot trade, Mikko has stepped up and performed like a #1 goaltender. And even with what happened against Vancouver, I mean, that was a tough goal that he gave up in a game that the Oilers had full control of, but he battled back like a pro, and I think that that's a real positive for Edmonton. You talked about the support guys. Obviously, the top-end guys are going too. I mean, Leon Draisaitl's on a 12-game point streak. He's got 17 goals in his last 19 games. It's a wonderful story, second in the NHL in goal scoring, and Connor McDavid's being Connor McDavid. I don't know if they can reel in these other teams. I'm pragmatic. I mean, that's going to be difficult to do in order to get a playoff spot, but they are playing a lot better, and I do think that that is something that you can build on moving forward.
I was just going to say, yeah, can we see this level of play go into next season as well?
Well, I think still the players in that room believe that the next season may come a little bit quicker because they still think there might be games in late April to play. I mean, that's the biggest thing right now is when you are in the mix, there's a lot of belief in the room. And what this
Which is nice because there's a lot of confidence in the room.
Absolutely. I mean, this recent run, if nothing else, has put you in a position to talk about the playoffs. Yeah. And if you're at least talking about the playoffs, that's a huge step in the right direction. One thing we haven't talked about is, the return of Andrej Sekera and how that's settled down the D-core as a whole. What it does is allow some of the minutes to be pulled back on guys like Nurse and Clefbaum. So they're not taxed with basically playing 28 to 30 every night. Sekera's giving you 15 quality minutes a night, and he settled down Matt Benning as well. And that means everyone else is kind of balanced out, and they're not necessarily playing these huge numbers that they had to when the Oilers were banged up on the back end. And so I think that D-core, the D-core that quite frankly the Oilers envisioned as they steamrolled into the 2017 playoffs, is finally back after nearly 2 years of injuries, illness, and a whole bunch of fluky things that have kept that top 6 from being intact. It's being intact, it's stable, and I think the team has benefited to a maximum extent.
There was a lot of criticism warranted because of what maybe didn't happen or did happen with Peter Chiarelli, but the one thing I will say in terms of defense of Peter, he just got bad luck with Sekera. Like the timing of the injury with the Achilles injury, taking place in August. There's not really a way. It's not like you can go, oh, well, let's go back 5 weeks previous into free agency and go sign ourselves a $4 million defenseman to replace him. Sekera's playing, he's only playing 16 minutes a game, but it's an effective 16 minutes a game. And they're left side with 2 guys that are playing between the two of them 47 minutes on the basis of the season. Suddenly, they're in a lot better spot defensively. So I do have some empathy for Peter, given that what he envisioned never really came to fruition until now. So the defense is more settled. Now, that said, teams that are deep, that can skate, they can give Edmonton troubles, which, Toronto did in that one game. But the Oilers have got the type of schedule. The Oilers have 15 games left. It would not surprise me if Edmonton won 11 or 12 of those games, which would put them really close to the playoffs because I think they've got a fairly favorable schedule. But they got a tough matchup against Toronto, and that defense that Jack talks about, they're going to get tested. They're going to have support from their forwards. They're going to have to manage the puck really well against the Maple Leaf team that's smarting after they blew that 2-0 lead themselves in Vancouver.
Put another way, Jess, no team in the NHL has had to deal with, at the time, their number 2 defenseman being out for the first 50 games of the next 2 years.
Right.
I mean, that's a
big.
significant loss, especially for a club that didn't necessarily have a ton of depth on the back end to begin with.
I know you mentioned the team's feeling good, and a specific player who's feeling really good about his game, Leon Draisaitl. He has a hot stick right now. He's feeling great.
Well, and Bob mentioned, I mean, he's been on an absolute tear, especially on the road. I mean, he's got a goal in 10 straight road games. He is the furthest thing from a home show you can imagine, and that's really been important because, Jess, we got to remember the backbone of this streak started with its play on the road, not necessarily on home ice. Now, what's positive for Edmonton and what Bob was talking about here, 3-0-1 in its last 4 heading into a game against Toronto. That's a real worm turner for me, because if they get that one, they're going to be prohibitive favorites in their next 2 games against the Rangers and the Devils, both of whom are kind of playing out the string. It's not to say those are gimmies, but this Toronto game is the real focal point for me as Edmonton kind of thunders down the stretch here trying to get back into a playoff spot.
Well, like you said, 15 games left, and I guess we'll just take it one game at a time. Jack, Bob, thanks so much.
Oilers Leafs, it should be a fun building on Saturday night.